Good evening, my dear listener. I'm so glad you're here tonight, in this quiet corner of time we share, where stories become lullabies for grown hearts. Before you close your eyes, I want you to find a little comfort in tonight's tale. It's called This Is Why She Left Without Goodbye. Some love stories end softly. This story isn't about heartbreak. It's about peace, the kind that comes after the storm has passed. It's about the quiet courage it takes to let go, without bitterness, without noise, just love, folded gently away. So take a slow breath in and let it go. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts slow down. Wherever you are, in your bed, on your couch, or sitting beside the window, know that this moment is only for you. Now, close your eyes if you wish, and let's begin our story. The house still smelled faintly of lavender and rain. Marianne always opened the windows after a storm, saying it helped the air feel new again. That morning, the scent lingered like an afterthought, soft, familiar, and fading. The curtains swayed in the cool breeze, brushing against the old wooden table where 2 cups waited, still warm. Thomas sat across from her, his eyes tracing the steam that curled from his coffee. He didn't say much anymore, but silence had become their language. The kind that held both comfort and distance, like 2 people sitting under the same blanket, feeling the same warmth, but thinking different thoughts. Marianne's hands rested quietly on her lap, her fingers turning the ring around and around. She had done that for years, unconsciously, when she was happy, when she was sad, when she didn't know how to say what she felt. The radio hummed softly in the background, a tune they both knew but couldn't quite name. It played like memory, something once bright, now gentle and almost transparent. She looked at him. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, carved by laughter and time. She loved those lines once, maybe she still did, just differently. There was no bitterness between them, no sharp words, only the realization that love sometimes settles instead of soaring. He caught her gaze and smiled faintly. "You're quiet this morning," he said. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just thinking." He didn't ask what about. He didn't need to. After 30 years together, some questions lose their meaning. The kettle clicked in the kitchen, long forgotten. Outside, the world was waking, birds calling, the first light brushing against the window pane. Inside, time seemed to hold its breath. Marianne looked around the room, the framed photographs, the old clock, the worn armchair he refused to replace. Every object carried a story, a fingerprint of shared life. Yet, she felt like a visitor in her own home. There comes a moment, she thought, when love no longer needs tending, when it has given all it came to give. The realization didn't hurt. It simply ached softly, like the distant echo of a song she once knew by heart. Thomas reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. His palm was warm, steady, still familiar. "You'll go for your walk today?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes, maybe a longer one." He nodded and lifted his cup again, eyes fixed on the window. That was how they said "I love you" now, through small questions, simple habits, gestures that filled the silence between what was and what would soon end. She wanted to tell him everything she couldn't write down, that she loved him still, that her leaving wasn't an act of loss, but of mercy. But some truths are meant to be carried quietly, like folded letters never mailed. When she rose from the table, the chair made a soft sound against the floor. He didn't look up right away. She walked to the window and watched the light spill across the garden. The lilacs bending gently, the sky turning from pale silver to morning gold. For a moment, she closed her eyes and let the sun touch her face. It felt like a blessing, the kind that asks for nothing in return. Then, with a small sigh, she turned and said, "I'll be back before lunch." He smiled without looking at her, lost in thought. And that was how she knew it was time. The morning light was softer than usual, a pale gold that brushed against the cobblestones and rooftops as if reluctant to disturb the peace. Marianne stepped outside, closing the door behind her with the care one gives to an old friend, softly, without sound. The air carried the scent of wet earth and lilac. Her shoes made a steady rhythm against the quiet street, a heartbeat echoing in time with her thoughts. She had walked this path hundreds of times, to the bakery, to the post office, to the park where Thomas used to wait for her with a newspaper folded under his arm. Today, each step felt different, heavier in meaning and lighter in purpose. She didn't carry much. A small bag, a notebook, and a scarf tucked neatly inside. The ring that had circled her finger for 30 years now sat on the windowsill, where the morning sun would soon find it. The town was just waking. Shopkeepers unlocking doors, a cat stretching beneath a bench, the hum of early bicycles rolling over the cobbles. Marianne smiled at the familiar faces. Mrs. Darlow from the flower shop waved, unaware that this greeting would be their last. "Lovely morning, isn't it?" Mrs. Darlow called. "Yes," Marianne answered softly. "Just lovely." She didn't stop. She couldn't. There was something sacred in the act of walking away while the world still felt kind. As she reached the park, she paused near the bench where she and Thomas had once shared countless afternoons, reading, napping, sometimes saying nothing at all. The bench was empty, glistening faintly from the rain that had passed in the night. She traced a finger along its worn edge, remembering how his hand used to rest there, close but not always touching. That quiet companionship had been enough for a long time. The wind picked up, scattering small petals across her shoes. She smiled faintly. It reminded her of their wedding day. How nervous Thomas had been, how his tie had sat slightly crooked until she reached out to fix it, laughing softly as she did. They had been so young then, believing that love, once promised, stayed the same. But love grows, she thought. Sometimes it grows apart, quietly, without anyone doing anything wrong. She continued walking, her pace unhurried. A church bell tolled in the distance, marking 9 o'clock. For a moment, she stopped to listen. The echo rolled over the rooftops, filling the air with a calm finality. Bells had always comforted her. They reminded her that time was still moving, that the world would continue turning long after she was gone. Passing the old bookshop, she saw the window display, faded novels, stories of travel and discovery. Inside, Mr. Keating was arranging a stack of poetry books. She almost went in to say goodbye but decided against it. Some farewells, she believed, should remain unspoken. The path led her down toward the river. The water moved lazily, reflecting the morning light in shimmering ribbons. She leaned on the railing and watched the ripples change shape, dissolving into one another, a living mirror of everything impermanent. She remembered how Thomas once told her that water always finds its way, no matter the obstacle. She hadn't understood it then. Now she did. Sitting on the low stone wall, she opened her notebook. Between its pages were fragments of things she'd written over the years, thoughts, recipes, memories, small confessions she'd never shared aloud. On the last page, she wrote quietly, "Thank you for the life we shared." It was beautiful. It was enough. A light breeze lifted the edge of the paper, as if to read what she'd written. She smiled, then closed the book gently. The sun had climbed higher now, turning the world brighter than she expected. It no longer looked like a day for endings, more like one for beginnings, though she had none planned. She simply wanted to keep walking, to follow the road until it disappeared into the hills. Somewhere behind her, in the home she had left, Thomas was likely finishing his coffee. He might look up and wonder why the chair opposite him felt so empty all of a sudden. But he would know, she thought. He always knew more than he said. Marianne adjusted her scarf and began walking again. There was no destination, only motion, each step a soft farewell to the life she'd built. The road curved gently ahead, leading her out of sight. She didn't look back, not once. Because sometimes the kindest goodbyes are the ones carried out in silence, when both hearts understand, without words, that love has completed its journey. By late afternoon, the light had softened again, slanting through the windows of a small riverside inn. The room smelled faintly of soap and pine from the open shutters. Marianne sat at the writing desk, a small pot of tea beside her, steam rising like a patient breath. She had walked until her legs ached, until the sound of the town had melted into the hush of the countryside. Now there was only the quiet ticking of an old clock and the rustle of pages as she opened her notebook. For a long while she didn't write. She simply listened, to the wind brushing against the shutters, to her own heartbeat steady and sure. It felt strange, being alone, yet not lonely. She thought of Thomas sitting at the kitchen table, perhaps wondering when she would return. A pang of tenderness crossed her chest, not sharp enough to wound, just enough to remind her that love still lived there. At last, she dipped the pen and began. My dear Thomas, by the time you read, or perhaps never read, these words, you will already understand. Nothing has broken between us. Something has simply settled. We built a home of quiet kindness, and it has done its work. I leave not from emptiness, but from fullness. Her hand trembled slightly. She paused, smiling at the thought of how he always teased her about her handwriting, how it leaned too far to the right, as if hurrying to finish its thought. Do you remember the garden after the first frost? The roses bowed their heads, but their colour lingered. That's what this feels like. I am bowing, not dying. Outside, the river murmured in agreement. The rhythm of the water matched the rhythm of her pen. Please don't search for reasons. There are none cruel enough to name. Think of this as the last kindness between us. You taught me to listen, to the kettle, the wind, the small ordinary miracles that make a day bearable. I will carry that music with me. She set the pen down. The words blurred slightly as tears welled, but she wasn't crying out of sorrow. It was gratitude finding its way out. She closed the notebook and pressed her hand over it, feeling the warmth fade from the page. The letter would stay here, she decided, folded beneath the teapot, hidden in a place no one might think to look. Some truths were meant to be written, not delivered. Marianne moved to the window. The sky was turning the colour of faded violets. The first evening star trembled above the trees. She breathed in the scent of the river and the promise of night. The ache in her chest softened into calm. Somewhere a bell sounded from a far-off church, marking the hour she would have begun supper at home. She smiled, thinking that Thomas would probably be reaching for the salt without looking, expecting her to pass it across the table. I hope he eats well tonight, she whispered. She lit the small lamp by the bed. Its light pooled across the floor in a golden circle. Sitting there, she realized that parting was not a single moment, but a series of gentle understandings. Each hour away from him was another thread released, another blessing spoken in silence. When she finally lay down, she didn't close the shutters. She wanted the river's reflection to keep her company. The moon rose, silver and whole, spilling its light across her pillow. In that glow, Marianne whispered a simple prayer, not for return, not for forgiveness, but for peace to settle over them both. The prayer felt like an ending and a beginning at once. When Thomas woke, the light was already spilling across the kitchen floor. It was the kind of soft morning light that arrived quietly, without fanfare, patient, forgiving, almost shy. For a few heartbeats, he forgot that Marianne hadn't returned the day before. Her absence didn't hit like a shock. It unfolded slowly, like remembering a dream that had already begun to fade. The second coffee cup sat where she'd left it. He filled both anyway, habit more than hope, and set one by her chair. He had done this for so many years that his hands didn't know any other rhythm. The chair, of course, remained empty. He sat down and listened to the small sounds of the house, the clock ticking, the wind touching the curtains, a bird calling from the garden. Each sound felt louder in her absence, yet somehow not lonely, just more present, more visible. Thomas took a sip of coffee. It was slightly bitter. He smiled to himself. Marianne always said he made it too strong. He imagined her walking somewhere beyond the hills, her scarf trailing lightly behind her, the same quiet confidence in her step that had once drawn him to her. He didn't picture her lost, only moving onward, as she'd always done, with quiet purpose. After breakfast, he opened the window and let the morning air in. The scent of lilac and earth carried through the room, and for a moment he closed his eyes, breathing it in. It felt like her, gentle, sure, unmistakably alive. On the windowsill, the sunlight caught something small, her wedding ring. He reached for it but didn't pick it up. Instead, he rested his fingers beside it, tracing its outline against the wood. He could almost hear her laugh, soft and unhurried. He didn't cry, there was no need to. What they'd shared didn't belong to sadness. It belonged to the quiet space where gratitude and love intertwined, where endings didn't mean loss, only transformation. He whispered, "Thank you, Marianne," and meant it. The day went on in its familiar way. He watered the plants, read the paper, and fed the cat that had started visiting their garden months ago. There was comfort in routine, he found. It didn't erase her absence, but it made it bearable, a reminder that life, in its patient way, keeps unfolding. That evening, as dusk deepened, he stepped out to the porch. The sky was a wash of soft rose and gold, fading into night. The porch light was already on. He'd kept it burning, almost without thinking. He remembered how Marianne loved that light, how she'd said it made the house look like it was waiting for someone. Now it seemed to wait for her still, but not with longing, with peace. He stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, listening to the slow hum of the night. A quiet warmth filled him, not of the body, but of the heart, the steady knowing that love, once given, doesn't disappear. It simply changes form, the way a flame becomes light. Inside, the clock chimed softly. He smiled, turned back to the house, and whispered into the still air, "Some love stories end softly, Marianne. Ours always did, and in that whisper, carried on the evening wind, there was no sorrow, only gratitude." He left the porch light burning, not because he expected her return, but because it felt right to keep something shining. A small kindness for the night, and a memory of the gentle woman who had taught him how to love quietly and let go tenderly. And that was "This is why she left without goodbye." A gentle reminder that not all endings break us, some simply return us to ourselves. If this story helped you find a little peace tonight, I hope you carry that stillness into your dreams. Remember, it's okay to let go softly, to release love without anger, and to forgive without words. You are safe here. You are enough. And tonight, you can rest. If you'd like more soothing bedtime stories like this, please remember to subscribe, leave a quiet night emoji in the comments, and join me again tomorrow night for another story whispered just for you. Sleep well, my friend. Good night.